were a young person, 18 to 24, you probably had lockdown at school or at university. So some of the best years of your life, you'll never get it back again. A lot of people who were pushing for lockdown, wouldn't have noticed much of a difference in their lives. You come out with all of that debts at university, can't get a mortgage. Everybody's telling you that the climate is going to destroy the planet. Everything's shit. Sorry, I can't say that on the podcast. Sorry. Everything's terrible. Everything's awful. Sorry, cut that out. And of course they're gloomy. Yeah. Where's the possibility? Where is the hope? And Labour's doing the same thing. Sir Keir gloomy and, Rachel down in the dumps. Come on, everybody. Yeah. Let's give these people something to hope for. And that's really what I want to do.
I'm Ben Houchin. This is the Blueprint Podcast, brought to you by Conservative Home, and we're going to lift the lid on centre-right politics in the UK. We're going to be speaking with influential figures from across the political spectrum to help understand how we can make centre-right politics relevant to people's lives again and turn it back into a political force for good. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Blueprint Podcast. Today I have Kemi Badenoch, who's standing for the Conservative leadership, down to the final two. We're going to find out who the winner is in the coming days. But to just quickly recap, Kemi was first elected as the MP for North West Essex, now North West Essex, in 2017, became a Minister in the Treasury in 2020, I think then moved to Local Government Minister in 21, Secretary of State for Business and Trade in 2023, and now, after the general election, the Shadow Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. So welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, Kemi.
Thank you, Ben.
Now, we've had all the other leadership contenders on, and actually we did record, and we have recorded with Prissy and Mel as well. And we will be using those, actually, I think, after the leadership election, because I think it's interesting to get kind of their pitch and their views on it as well. But what I've started with all of them, because a lot of these types of things, and I'm sure you've done many interviews and podcasts so far as part of the leadership election, is often very policy and kind of very specific issues focused. And I find that what you don't get and what members don't see is kind of a bit more about the person. So I like to start with, before we get into the politics and your kind of journey in politics, tell everybody that's listening a little bit more about Kemi Badenoch, where you're from, where you grew up, and that journey into even getting involved in politics in the first place.
Oh, that's a long story. That's its own podcast. A lot of people know that I grew up in Nigeria. And that is one of the things that fundamentally shaped my view of the world. I was born in Wimbledon, but till 16, that's where I pretty much lived with bits and bobs in the US. And one of the things that worries me is that we take this country for granted. Other countries which aren't doing well, it's not because the people there are stupid. It's bad ideas, bad culture, bad policies. And that is what destroys countries. And we are very lucky here. The things that happened, the path that we took in the UK, in a lot of Western Europe, in the US, is something that is rare. Most countries have gone wrong by doing other stuff. And so my conservative beliefs come from those fundamental principles. And it's why the campaign that I'm running is starting with principles first. Equality under the law. I cannot explain just how critical it is. Making sure everybody is treated exactly the same. Doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, what your status in society is. That you'll go in front of a judge and it's equal before the law. Things like the concept of being innocent until you're proven guilty. It is quite a radical concept. Many places are you're guilty, prove that you're innocent. It totally changes the way a culture and a society works. Growing up without constant electricity means I'm very paranoid about energy. That is why I'm a net zero skeptic. I know what it's like when the lights don't turn on, and it's another thing we take for granted. Energy is growth. And this is why when I ask people to support me, it's not because we know exactly what the energy policy is going to be in 2029. We need to look at what the world looks like then. It's what kind of person is Kemi? Which direction is she going to take us? Where are her convictions? And you will probably remember when we had the ZEV mandate debate in Cabinet and the disagreements about whether to move from 2030 to 2035, the impact on the electric vehicle push and so on. My belief is that you have to make sure that your energy supply is secure. It's very, very key. So that's who I am, and it's
Was that sorry, Kemi? But wait, so when you were growing up,
yeah.
it's interesting. So you point to specific examples of where, and in some ways, it feels quite similar to mine. In that, were you political at a young age, though, or did you just see issues and then realise that there was a different way? When did you come to the UK then?
16.
You were 16. So when you came to
1996.
16, was there a kind of a juxtaposition against what you saw in Nigeria compared to the UK that then helped mature that view?
Yes.
Rather than you being a conservative in Nigeria at 12,
Yes.
for instance.
So, no, I was not political at all.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of opinions, even for a 10-year-old and 12-year-old. And I was always told, oh, you talk too much. You talk you talk too much, and, you're not old enough to understand these things. And why do you have these opinions? And, you're overconfident and so on. All of the things which actually help in politics. But I wouldn't have been political in any sense that's meaningful here, because I grew up under a military dictatorship. So I wasn't dreaming about, one day you're going to be president or prime minister. Or the people who ran the country were soldiers, and they were very visible. The the state governors were soldiers. The equivalent of a Ron DeSantis was, a Navy captain and things like that. And that was just what life was. I mean, what is amazing is that I'm here at all. And I did not even know that I had British citizenship until I was about 14. So lots of people think, oh, you were born here to get the citizenship. They don't understand that story of empire, that story of the Commonwealth. And people say, oh, you can't possibly be British. You have to, the ethnicity is all wrong and so on. And I challenge them and say, you don't realize that for 150 years, there were people from here going to other countries saying, you are all British now. You're British, you're part of the British Empire. And that doesn't just disappear because that goes away. That there is a legacy that comes from that. But the politics came a lot later. And it was probably like you. I don't know if it's the same for Lee. Lee was probably...
So we should quickly introduce Lee. So Lee's sat in the corner of the room at the moment.
Lee was probably very political. He'd gone to Oxbridge and all of that. And did you do politics?
I did not. No, that's outrageous. No,
Sorry,
I did history.
Sorry.
So for people that are listening, we have Lee here, Lee Rowley, who is a former MP and Kemi's campaign director as part of the leadership campaign. So Lee, welcome. I should have introduced you at the beginning. Apologies, but yeah. Sorry, Kemi.
It's very... it's just very unique, the setup that we have here. But I wasn't political.
Were your parents outspoken then?
Yes,
were they very opinionated?
In their own ways.
That kind of confidence and
yes,
kind of those
I think so. A lot of my thinking came from my dad, but the confidence came from my mum. My mum was a lecturer, standing up in front of lots of people, and she always taught me sort of, stand up for yourself, respect yourself, behave properly. She was very into standards and things being...
Yep.
She is. My mum's still alive. It's my dad that's gone. But she hated politics. She said, why are you doing this? And I remember something very funny when I was younger. The university that she worked at, they would vote for some university positions. And I said, why don't you go for this? And she said, I will not give those people the chance to vote against me. Like the idea of allowing some people to say, no, we don't like you is anathema to her. Whereas, we know that that's part of it. You just have to suck it up.
Absolutely.
You can't please everybody. And that's one of the things that I find very tough now. That the world is very polarized. Our country is becoming more and more polarized. And whatever you do, someone somewhere is going to be angry. And I would like us to try and unify and bring people together. But the question you asked about, was I political? No. Issue by issue, I started working out that these are my people. But the Conservatives are my people. I don't like those Labour lot, that Labour lot. Those Lib Debs don't know anything. They're just all over the place. The Conservatives are the real deal.
And so when you started to realise that, as you turned 16, how did you then go from being opinionated, as lots of people are, I suppose, but then actually get involved in the Conservative Party? How did that come about? Because it's a strange thing in itself, actively getting involved in the Conservative Party.
I don't know why people do it at university, but that's probably because I did a very, very sort of laborious degree. Engineering is not like history.
The shade.
And engineering was just very intense. And it's a lot of hours. So I went to a university that was actually quite skewed towards the humanities. So everybody there was doing, lots of artsy stuff. And they had lots of time to do other things, join clubs, do plays. And I was just there doing maths for 4 years. So that's certainly what it felt like. So I didn't have much space for extracurricular. The politics really came in after university. At university, I met what I call a lot of North London lefties, posh, wealthy North London lefties. They'd go home for the weekend, and they were just not my kind of people. They took a lot of things for granted. They were very entitled, and they didn't know that much about the world. Certainly not the world that I'd come from, especially leaving a relatively wealthy family and having to look after myself, age 16, was very tough. And now I look back on it, I've got an 11-year-old, and the idea of her leaving home and just fending for herself, I think it's completely crazy. I think what my parents thinking.
I was literally having this conversation with my parents the other day, actually. And when we were kids, it would literally be, particularly on a weekend or during the holidays, it's like, just go out, come back when the streetlights come on or before it gets dark.
Yeah.
And I've got four nephews and a niece. And the idea that I would even let Oscar, who's now 10, just wander the street, because I was at that age, wander the streets for like 8 hours and not really think where they're from. Without a mobile phone, it's not as if you could contact them.
I don't know what's happened to us. The things that I did, I don't want my daughter doing. I want to keep her in a bubble. And I know it's wrong, so I have to consciously say, she can do this, she can go out and do that, and it's fine. But we've turned into a society that wants zero risk. I call it safetyism. And it's one of the things that I am fundamentally against. Safetyism is making us take fewer risks. We're worried about everything. We want government to get involved in everything. And it is destroying us. We need people to go out there, take some risks. That's where innovation comes from. That's how you find new solutions. You meet different people, not just be in your echo chamber.
And so when was your first experience of the Conservative Party then?
I joined my local party, which was Wimbledon, in 2005, and it was just from watching. So by 2005, I know which is my party, and I just assumed that it would win the election. I thought, well, these Labour people have won again. How is this happening? I didn't like their politics, and then there was a leadership contest, and it suddenly got exciting. And I thought, this David Davis guy is really cool. I was not in the David Cameron camp. I never heard of him. I'm going to join, going to vote, and so on. And my first vivid memory, I know I did some stuff with the local party. I can't remember what it was, but my first vivid memory was a Conservative Future event where I met Conor Burns. And I think he just thought, who is this person? And we started chatting, and he said, you need to meet the party chairman, who is Frances Maud. And he said, I think that she'd be quite cool. Well, he didn't say cool, but something along those lines. And I just thought, this is a party that's very open. And it wasn't quite what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be something where it's, we only talk to posh people and, our clique or an old school tie. It was very open. It was almost like thank you for coming to join us.
Yeah, the mid 2000s were not great. So you want to come? You want to get involved?
Yes, exactly. It was that, and I found it so welcoming. And a lot of my friends, by this point, we're all over the place. We've all left university. We're all doing different things, and it felt quite lonely actually. Just I wasn't in a group, in a team. I like having a team of people around me. It's why my campaign is the way it's structured, the way it is. It's not just about me. It's about I like it to be me and my friends. And I suddenly started making new friends in the party. So it was a social thing more than anything else.
Yeah.
And what was interesting, the interesting thing was that people kept saying, have you thought about being an MP? Have you thought about being an MP? And probably deep in the subconscious, it was there, but people asking me to do it made a difference. It's why I support the campaigns Ask Her to Stand. I know that women and men think about this differently. I've also, been in the candidates department briefly. Men literally beating down the door. I want to do this. Why hasn't this happened? Where's my PAB? Why isn't it? And the women just sit there waiting for people to say, have you thought about it? And also, when they don't pass the assessment board, men and women behave differently. When a woman... typically, when a woman fails her PAV, what happens is she says, oh, I didn't pass, I'm not good enough. The men say, I want to take it again. When is the next time? So and this is one of the reasons why I think we end up with different numbers. You've got to look at that pipeline, that if people behave differently, you need to make sure that you adjust to the process for those behaviors. That if a man and a woman both score 49 out of 100, you don't want the woman walking away if the man tries again. You want them both to try again because they're both equally good. So you've got to make up for that in some way.
Yes, those are the process drivers.
Yes,
isn't it?
exactly.
It's what causes it.
Exactly.
And for those that are listening, the PAB, the Parliamentary Assessment Board, is in effect the pre-process that anybody in the Conservative Party has to go through to even qualify to put themselves forward for a seat.
I think you've got to find ways in as well, because I remember when I first. So you had a great experience coming to the Conservative Party. When I
Did you not?
Yeah, well, for my first one, I went. It was at university. I thought I'll try it, and I was 18, and the door opened in wherever it was, Exeter College or something like that, and there was a 18-year-old kid there in a three-piece tweed suit and a monocle, And I was like, right, this is not for me. So I left it.
We have all met that person in the Conservative Party. I think there are lots of very similar stories. I mean, I was the same. Interestingly, my parents weren't political either. They were very opinionated, but not political. I didn't know until I became a local councillor, whatever, back in 2011, how my mother had ever voted. So I was in my kind of mid-20s before I even knew how she did. To be fair, I don't really know how she votes. My dad used to be a socialist and then became a police officer and grew up and realised that he's definitely not a socialist. And you do get a lot of that. But one of the opinions that I always came, and I don't know whether you got, maybe more you, Lee, growing up, that one of the things that came through was that whole kind of career politician thing. It's like, we hate career politicians, no real life experience. And that was one of the things that actually kept me away from the Conservative Party at a young age. So I didn't get involved in the Young Conservatives. And then when I got involved, when I was 21, 22, 23, after university, getting a real job, I kind of dipped my toe in the water. You did all of a sudden find that type of person. You kind of think, well, if that's the first experience of young people getting involved with the Conservative Party, it's no necessarily wonder that we're not capturing people who are naturally conservative. But that's interesting.
I know what you mean. And I met that person too. But I just thought, this is a weird person. What's wrong with you? And why are you dressed like that? But I also found it just entertaining. It's like going into a different world, and
they're all decent people. This is the thing. It's
exactly.
Not, it's just something that we're not used to. It's the Conservative Party, particularly young Conservatives. It's a generalisation, but there tends to be that type of person that can be drawn to the Conservative Party. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Conservative Party is therefore that.
Yes.
And nor that are those people wrong in what they think and how they believe either. It's almost quite a superficial kind of social status issue of like, they tend to have probably not been the coolest kid in school. But you know what? Some of the most successful people in the country often weren't the coolest kid in the school.
Very, very much so. And also, I think this is probably where my personality helps a little bit. In that people would often say, "Oh, it's not your kind of people who are there," and I think, "Oh, okay, well, I wanted to go see for myself."
That was almost like the contrarian point.
Yes, exactly. But always wanting to just test and push,
Yeah.
which I know as I was growing up, when I was at school, even at university, and with friends, like, why are you always testing things? But if you don't test and see for yourself, you'll never know.
Yeah.
And I want us to have more young people in the party. Lee and I talk about this a lot. Well, our backgrounds are very different, but we do have quite a similar worldview. We're born in the same year. And one of the things that we worry about is just the way that the world has changed from when we were young. It was so much fun when we were in our 20s. We had like a great 20s, we had great teens, the 80s were amazing, the 90s were amazing. You're about the same age as we are. I think you're younger than us, actually.
Yeah. I'm 37, yeah.
Oh my God. You're a baby.
How old are you, Lee?
I'm 44.
All right, okay. So
44,
a little bit older.
But I remember, I remember sort of like when I went to uni, the world just felt so full of possibility and so optimistic. The Berlin Wall had crashed. We'd sort of got this agreement around the world that there was a model which worked, and it looked like it worked for a time, and then it all just slowly started receding, and then here we are now.
And I don't think that young people now feel like that.
No.
If you're a young person, 18 to 24, you probably had lockdown at school or at university. So some of the best years of your life, you'll never get it back again. A lot of people who are pushing for lockdown, they wouldn't have noticed much of a difference in their lives. You come out with all of that debts at university. can't get a mortgage. Everybody's telling you that the climate is going to destroy the planet. Everything's shit. Sorry, I can't say that on the podcast. Sorry.
You can say what you want.
Everything's terrible. Everything's awful. Sorry, cut that out. This is, and of course they're gloomy. Yeah. Where's the possibility? Where is the hope? And Labour's doing the same thing. Sir Keir gloomy and, Rachel down in the dumps. Come on, everybody. Yeah. Let's give these people something to hope for. And that's really what I want to do.
And it's a big part of it. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, everybody should... There has to be hope and opportunity. And young people, like I said, when we were kids growing up, you kind of felt like the world was your oyster and you could do anything. Whereas it feels to me like particularly kids in their teens and even into their 20s now feel like, actually, I'm about to kind of leave the school system and life's now going to be quite hard. Whereas... like I said, I think we're all saying the same thing here. We left the school system or the university system and kind of thought, right, this is actually really exciting. What are we going to do? There's a world out there. Let's explore it and see what we make of it. So, kind of bringing that on to the leadership campaign, because I think you've touched upon it a few times here. When you compare it to all of the leadership campaigns, not just obviously Robert Jenrick, who's in the final two with you, a lot of their campaigns have been very much, Robert Jenrick wants to be the leader, or James Cleverly, etc. Whereas you've got a completely different tact, which comes with risk, right? Because it's not as easy and as tangible for people to understand of, I'm voting for, say, Robert as the leader of the party and this is what he stands for. Yours is, you've branded it not as Kemi, but as Renewal 2030. Do you want to explain why you've done that and what that means to people?
Yes. I mean, the story probably starts not this cycle, but for the first time that I stood, which was 2 years ago. And I never wanted to be leader. It was this guy and Julia Lopez who said...
It's my fault.
Yeah, it is your fault. Who said, you've got to do it. I enjoy, getting into the detail of stuff. I'm an engineer. My job, as I loved it before politics, was putting my headphones on, shutting the world out and, getting stuff done. And we were just becoming very disillusioned by the way the party was going. This is what we signed up for. We've done all this Brexit stuff. We're not delivering it. We're going, the talking right, governing left was something that we kept discussing. And it wasn't just the three of us. And after the saga with the resignations and Boris's premiership ending, which was a very difficult time. It was unbelievably difficult because we were fans of his, but it wasn't working. And he stood down. We thought, well, what do we do now? And we knew that Liz and Rishi would be the front runners. And what we wanted to do was be heard. And this is part of what we're trying to do with our campaign. That too many of us, not just the members, not just the councillors, but even MPs, and as I've learned from experienced cabinet ministers, don't have a say. And we thought, we'll run, we'll get a few votes, and then we'll go out, and then one of the camps will bring us in, and then we will finally be in the room and we'll have a say. That was the plan. And it didn't quite work out like that. Nice. Instead, I just kept staying in and everybody else was going out. And by the time I went out, I was fourth out of the 12 people who stood. It was too late. All the deals had been done. So we didn't get in the room.
Oh, right, okay.
And then it was, actually, people like what you have to say. People like you. If the chance comes again, we should do this again. But it has never just been about me. I can't do this alone. I want it to be about a group of people. I want it to be about a team. I want it to be about a mission. The first mission, in my view, is renewal, because I don't think the party is in a fit state. I don't want to use the term modernisation, because I think modernisation makes it sound like it's old-fashioned or what we were doing is not right and there's some cooler stuff. I think being authentic conservatives is cool. And that's what I want. I want us to renew who we were rather than try and change who we are to be something else. And I think I can get people from across the board to agree with that. So I'm not becoming, some people are accusing me of becoming a lefty and all the lefties are supporting me. I think I'm taking the whole party on a journey. I don't know. Maybe you disagree.
Well, what does that mean, though? What is renewal, though? I mean, you say renewal 2030 and you say we need to renew the party. Part of taking people on that journey is giving them that vision about what the party needs to become.
Yes.
And what is that? What does the party need to become?
It is a party that is based on principles, not just policy. Yeah. So I'll give you an example of how we go wrong. During the election, there was an announcement that we were going to bring in national service or a commission on national service. And I just thought, where the hell has this come from? I heard it a day before. Everyone else, this announcement is coming tomorrow, and I said, why are we doing this? What is this based on? And the person who was informing me said, oh, well, we've done some focus groups and it polls well. This is a mad way to carry out policy. You're basically asking people, what do you like? What do you like? What do you like? Okay, here you go. That is not how you create a coherent policy platform. It starts with values. If we had been talking about young people a lot, that we want to give something to young people, if we'd been talking about pride in our country and patriotism, then saying that, we all need to give something back. It's an aging society. We need more. We want you to remember what it was like. Then you could talk about bringing back national civil service or whatever it was. But if you just announce it, people say they want national service, so we're going to give them national service. This is how you lose. It's not connecting meaningfully with the public. And that's what I'm talking about. What are the things that unite us? We've got into this sort of narcissism of small differences. Oh, you're on the left of the party, you're on the right of the party. You voted Leave, I voted Remain. You did this, I did that. That's not real. We have more that binds us. So let's talk about that stuff. It's freedom of speech, freedom of association, that equality under the law that I was talking about. If you do that, there's no two-tier policing. It's like one rule for everybody, and that's that. Let's talk about family. That's one of the things that really shows the difference between us and the other parties. Personal responsibility. We believe that family and personal responsibility are more important. Lib Dems and Labour think the government can solve it all. When you start from there, then you don't start going off-piste. I think we went off-piste during lockdown. If we had started from a position of trust and personal responsibility, we could have had all the rule of six and so on, but we didn't need to make them criminal offences. The criminal offences creating fixed penalty notices is what ended up getting Boris in the end. Like he set, it was like a trap he had accidentally set for himself. If we had followed principles first, we would not have run into trouble. And that's what I want us to do.
The thing I don't get about politics, having done a business career before, is in every other business area that I've been in. And politics is different to business, but you start with where you want to get to, and you start with the principles behind it, and then you work out how that applies into what you need to do, and then you work out how to do it, and then you work out how to comms it. My 7 years in politics, it's like everybody's just forgotten the first 2 or 3 elements of that. And I've no idea why that's the case, because this is the most important thing that you can do in a country. And I'm tired as a Conservative, really tired, previously as an MP, as an activist for 20 years, of good people standing up as Conservatives and saying, we're going to do this, and just expect it to happen. It doesn't work like that. If we really want to apply Conservative principles, personal responsibility, equality under the law, family, we've got to start at the absolutely beginning and work out how it works for the 2030s again. There's no point just throwing stuff out because it doesn't matter at this point, and it won't work. And if we don't get back to that fundamental point, we will never change this country in a Conservative way, which is the reason why we're all sat in this room. Right?
And I think it's interesting because if you look at a similar thing and you look at what the Labour Party are doing and now the Labour government have done, and they did this, or they failed to do that in the election itself, one of the things that we lost our way on, certainly over the last 2 or 3 years, I would say since Boris had a story about what he was trying to do with the country. But since then, and obviously we all know what's happened with Boris and obviously subsequent to that with Liz and Rishi, etc., one thing that we failed to do, and I think this is what you're getting at, there's no overarching narrative that binds the Conservative family together that's based in those principles that you talk about. And the thing that I always go back to is one of my first major experiences with the Central Party and certainly number 10 in the central campaigning machine was in the run-up to the European elections in 2014 and then the election in 2015 when Linton Crosby was involved. And we went in and we did loads of briefings with him. He kind of talked through it. And I think anybody who doesn't know Linton Crosby is, go and Google him. Incredible campaigner. Hopefully we can bring him back at some point to help us win the next election. But he came up with that exact same point. He said, what you don't do is you don't move where you are as a person or as an organisation to fit whatever it is you think is of the time. What you have a foundation and a base. And what you have to do is therefore connect that with the policies that you're creating. So if you believe in, equality under the law or, personal responsibility, etc., what you don't do is you don't lose sight of that for a policy. What you do is you base your principles and you explain through good communication plan and a good story and a narrative that's built up over a long, long time. We have this policy because it's based in these foundations, and therefore there is the bigger picture as to how this all links us together. And I think if you look in the very recent, if you look at what the Labour Party did, I think one of the reasons, I mean, they're terrible for lots of reasons, but one of the reasons they're having such a terrible time in the first 100 days of government is they pretended for the last 2 years basically just to get rid of the Tories.
Exactly.
Let's be honest. I mean,
Exactly.
lots of people voted to get rid of a Tory government.
Have you been listening to my hosting speeches?
I've not been allowed in. They're all closed, aren't they?
This is exactly what I've been saying.
But they come along and they say, just get rid of the Tories, it's terrible, we need change. They then don't explain what change is, and then they expect the public to buy into everything that they've come out in the first 100 days. And the public are kind of like, well, where's this come from? What's it grounded in? What's the story? What's the narrative? Where are you trying to take us as a country? And it's this point of a good leader and a good party can say, vote for us because this is where we're going to take you. This is the journey we're going on, and this is the promised land, and this is how we're going to make your lives better. And therefore, if we work back from that, then this policy and this policy all leads towards that goal.
Yep.
The Labour Party have kind of done it, I suppose, learned from us in a very bad way over the last couple of years, which is just get elected, not really tell people about the journey we're going on, but make all of these changes, and then people kind of feel like the head's spinning.
Yes. And
they
the
don't
stuff
really know what
is
it's
being
about.
done to them.
Absolutely.
It's something that I want us to change. I don't want the parliamentary party in particular to feel like stuff just keeps being done to them. I want all of us to feel like we have a stake in what's happening. That is what will stop people putting in letters into the 1922. If you feel that you've got no hand in what is happening, yet you've been elected and you have to go on the doorstep and defend stuff, it's very, very difficult if you're absolutely against what's happening. I hated having to go out and defend things that I knew were not what we should be doing. But you have to take collective responsibility. We can't all just be arguing the toss on what we want. So let's use this time wisely. We're in opposition now. We're not going to win any votes. So why don't we work out a sensible, coherent platform that we can all get behind, rather than issue by issue sort of diktat.
But I also think collective responsibility broke down a lot in the last couple of years for the same reason we've just talked about. And we can only fix if... it is impossible for any politician to agree with everything
Exactly.
that party does. And so if you have to go out and defend the party line, and even though you think, I don't quite agree with this, you find it much easier to do it if you realise that it's part of the bigger picture and you buy into the bigger picture.
Exactly.
So you might not agree with every individual element, but ultimately you recognise that it fits into that big plan and those foundations that are taking us to where we all agree we want to go to.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think we lost our way. But just developing that a little bit, and to play as devil's advocate a little bit, you could be in the coming days the new leader of the Conservative Party. And, it sounds like we're all vigorously agreeing with kind of what needs to happen as the next steps. And
This is very good, yes.
I accept where you're coming from.
I expect you to agree.
Well, hopefully.
Well, you did say that you and Lee don't always agree on everything
That's
before.
true.
But you also then have the reality of politics.
Yeah.
So, you're going to walk in a few days after, for example, a budget. And, you're then going to have to establish your team, and then you're going to do interviews with the media because you are the leader of the opposition, right? And they're going to start asking you stuff. So it's one thing having the ideas and that kind of long-term renewal vision, but people, let's say you are elected as leader, in a few days, within a few days of that, you're going to get an interview with, I don't know, Peston or Beth Rigby or whoever, and they're going to say, well, what do you think about the budget? Would you have done this? Would you have done that? And by definition, they're going to drag you into policy. And you can't just sit there and be like, well, I'm not telling you because I don't have a view on that. I'm renewing the party.
No,
how do and I think, to be fair to him, that's where Robert Jenrick's coming from, because I know there's been this, I think it's been overblown to be fair, but there has been this issue of, I think Robert's been very clear on setting out quite detailed policies, and you're kind of talking about the renewal argument, but surely the reality is somewhere in the middle, right? You can't not have policy.
So there are some things which I can say I would definitely do. I would reverse, for instance, this VAT on private schools, because I know that is something which you can just do like that, and which doesn't have second, third order consequences. That's just it's a money thing. You don't have to pay this. That VAT that they're slapping on is not going to raise anything, and it's going to cause problems for state schools. So that's the kind of thing which I can say, that's our policy. We're not going to have this. You vote Conservative, we're going to take VAT off education. We do not tax aspiration. That is our principle. For something like we're going to leave the ECHR, if it was that simple, then I would make that commitment. I don't mind us leaving the ECHR. In fact, I think we probably will have to. But it is not a silver bullet, and it's not straightforward. If we leave it, how are we going to make sure that we still have a way of enshrining those rights? Because the common law has now changed, for example. It is not a silver bullet. It's not the only reason why the deportations aren't happening. Other countries in the ECHR are deporting. What are they doing right that we're not doing? I think it has to do with people. We also know that there will be impacts on things like the Good Friday Agreement. These were the things that we didn't think about during Brexit. We spent ages on Windsor Framework and Northern Ireland Protocol. So I look at what that decision means. That, okay, if we do this, then there's going to be that, and then there are these people who will obstruct and so on. And we can't just say, ban this, ban that, sack them, and it'll all be fine. I have been in government. It doesn't work like that. We do not have that kind of executive power. The power is in Parliament, and the judiciary also has a function which it needs to fulfill. So we need a proper, well thought through plan. Making the promise without knowing how you will deliver it, you end up in the position that Theresa May ended up in, where Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then just not being able to move. I do not want to be in a position where I've made promises to people and then I know we can't deliver them. So let's work it out. Let's have a star chamber and figure out how we leave the ECHR rather than make the commitment. And also, I don't know what the issues are going to be in 2029. So I want people to look at me. What kind of person is she like? This is not a general election.
Yeah.
This is who can lead this party, who can take it out of the doldrums. You want somebody with conviction. You want someone with integrity. You want somebody who is strong. I have shown that already. I wasn't sacked from any of my jobs because I didn't do them properly. There was no scandal or no weird thing with donors. All my donors are public. I have loads of them. I don't have a small group of people funding this campaign. I've got lots and lots. What kind of person do we want? That's what I am trying to set out. The policies will come, but wouldn't you like to be involved in the policy process, Ben? Do you just want to get a letter saying, here's what we're going to do, and then maybe you like it, maybe you don't like it? I want you to be involved in how we shape this. So we're going to do what David Cameron did. We're going to do what Margaret Thatcher did. We're going to take a step back, have policy commissions and groups, people feeding in. I think that is the right way to use opposition. And we're not going to spend forever doing it. In a couple of years' time, we will have stuff that we can start talking about. But we can respond to a budget because we are all conservatives. We can say this is what's wrong with it. Here's what we would have done differently. But it's in the margins. You know, would we have put a pasty tax in hindsight and things like that? Who knows? But the public aren't necessarily interested in the micro detail. We know where we are on inheritance tax. We know we don't want more taxes. So we can start from principles when we have those interviews.
There's also, we've got to, as a party, be wary of false binaries. Because if we try and put very, very complicated questions within our internal family discussion in the Conservative Party into false binaries, you know, there's kind of, I'm for leave, you're for remain, whatever, two levers here actually, by the way, but a separate point, then we don't allow ourselves the space over the time we need to have the kind of conversations that we need to have.
Yeah.
So, you know, take the ECHR thing. Okay, throw the ECHR out tomorrow. You know, the day after tomorrow, you would still be in a discussion about ECAP. You would still be in a discussion about modern slavery, about some of the stuff you've spoken about. Yeah. Can you imagine the level of cynicism in my old seat in Staveley or Claycross or Dronfield when we've gone along and said, do you know what, it's this simple, we can do this and this will happen, and then we do it and it doesn't happen? There are people holding on with their fingertips that politics works at the moment, and they're pretty cynical about it. I saw that on the doorsteps a few months ago. And we cannot, as a party, just boil stuff down into these sort of nice things which say, do this, that happens, when we know that that isn't the case.
Yes.
But we also,
we're creating cynicism.
I don't disagree, but we also have to be aware that the academia of politics, and us, and again, I'm not saying you're suggesting this, but going away and spending a couple of years talking to ourselves about what our offering should be and thinking it all through and having a plan for the country is one thing. But the reality is that there's a 24-hour news cycle.
That's true.
Politics is a pretty, difficult game at the best of times. Everybody wants a response. As leader of the opposition, you're going to be demanding a response.
We are not a vacuum. So I'm not saying that we empty our heads and there's nothing going on. We can look now at winter fuel payments. That is something which we oppose because of how they've done it. Do I think millionaires should get the Winterfield payment? No, but they shouldn't have taken it from all those other people. Most people aren't millionaires. So we're not going to be an empty policy vacuum. There is lots of stuff that we already agree on. But what should the future be like? How are we going to fix the problems of our age? Global mass migration is a critical issue. Aging society is a critical issue. What are we going to do about social care? We don't know. It's not going to be the status quo. That's probably not sustainable. Let's go and fix it. I have ideas about what we should do, but some people might not like that. Maybe there's not a majority for it. Politics is about being able to count. We don't live in a dictatorship. And one of the things that I find is that many people outside politics assume that it is all executive and it's like a business. And if you're the leader, you say what's going to happen. If people don't like it, you tell them where to go. Rob has said this thing, which I find extraordinary, that all the shadow cabinet need to sign up to doing this. Otherwise, they won't be able to sit in it. That's a single issue thing when there's so much else going on. We need to remember that politics is a zero-sum game. It is the only industry where you can sack someone today and they're still sitting there tomorrow. They don't really go away. Only the electorate can sack people. The person who is your junior today can be your boss tomorrow if they just get enough support. And so you have to be mindful of that. It creates a very febrile environment. If you get promoted, that means somebody else has been sacked. Even amongst peers, that is a level of intense competition that you don't get in the normal business world. And you have people who are paid to oppose you. We're the opposition now, but Coca-Cola isn't paid to trash Pepsi. It's just, if you work in NatWest and you don't like it, you can go to Barclays. If you work in the Telegraph, you don't like it, you can go to the Times. There is nowhere else to be an MP. We all have to be in that place and work together. The my way or the highway only works if you have the numbers. At the moment, we are split on so many things. So let's get the consensus. There's no point having policies if someone else is going to go on Newsnight and say, oh, I disagree with this, I disagree with that. That's what the public didn't like. The endless squabbling, the endless infighting. At the moment, they don't trust us. Lee lost his seat because people did not trust us to deliver. Saying, oh, well, this time we really mean it, here's some new promises, is not what's going to get that trust back. We have to show we have changed. That's why I am pushing for renewal. And it may be that people don't want that, but it's a competition. Rob has an offer, I have a different offer, and it's up for people to choose. But they shouldn't assume that that means we're just going to be smiling and saying, well, we'll come back to you in 2 years. Absolutely not. People know I've got strong opinions. You know where I stand on stuff like net zero, not because I'm saying it now, but because back in 2019, when everybody was just clapping it through, I stood up and I said, what are we doing? Where's the plan? People know where I stand on a lot of issues because I spoke when it mattered and when it wasn't trendy to talk about those things. So you can rely on me. I'm not just cooking up views for a leadership contest.
And while that's going on, how do you think the dynamic of reform is going to play into that? Because they're very kind of popularist, simplistic.
Indeed.
I mean, Farage is an incredible opposition MP who can identify a problem but not necessarily the full solution or a very simplified version of whatever the solution might be.
Yeah.
Again, how do we combat that under a Kemi leadership?
By dominating the conversation and the narrative. At the moment, no one is listening to us. We need a leader who can cut through. I think that we have given Nigel Farage the space to do what he is doing. We need to be confident. At the moment, we don't want to say anything unless it's policy or micro policy or an announcement. That's not what gets people out of bed. You would have met many people knocking on doors who said, I voted Conservative all my life. They didn't do that because we took 2p off income tax or because we made lots of GPs, even when we did that. They do it because they feel that you understand their lives, that you are for them, a meaningful connection. That is how we tackle reform. We are about building things. We are Conservatives. We want to build a brighter future. Reform is about tearing stuff down. That is a big difference that we need to highlight. They are able to spot problems. Yes, it is true. We can see those problems too. Their diagnosis that this stuff is broken is not wrong. We think that the system is broken. But they cannot build a coalition that will get to government. They cannot. And even if all Conservatives went with reform at the last election, there would not have been a majority. We need to win on the common ground. That is how we get back into government. And that is what we need to talk about.
Well, that's been brilliant, Kemi. I mean, just before we finish, I suppose I'll ask how last few days of the campaign, how do you think it's going? Are you feeling confident?
How do you think it's going?
Well, Lee, you're the campaign director.
How is it going?
We are always hopeful. We're never confident
Yeah.
because we are going to work this and we're going to push it and we're going to make sure that Kemi's message goes out right until the last few days, because it's so important that everybody votes. It's so important that everybody makes that decision. And it's just important that we have the debate that we've been talking about. As you say, there are two different options here, and we want the party to make a good decision about that. Because we think there's a brilliant pathway here that we can get back to government pretty quickly if we do the basics now and use the next 4 years in a way. So making that case right up until
until the last day.
next week.
We cannot be complacent. And, this is one of the reasons why I'm on here. I want people to hear the message of what it is that we're trying to deliver. So getting out there, I'm going to all sorts of members' events, squeezing them in. Last night, we squeezed one in at 9:15, cut one in half just to make sure we are getting FaceTime with as many people as possible.
And do you find that members across the country behave differently? Do you find that like a Northern Tory is different to, an Essex Tory, or how are you finding that?
I haven't, but there might be some selection bias there in terms of who is turning up. They all say the same thing. They are all sick of the infighting. They are all sick of broken promises and us not being authentic, not being real Conservatives, not being conviction Conservatives. People told me, when you get to Scotland, you have to be, very soft. It's all one nation up there. And I went there, and those were the hardest. They were the hardest group of people, because the people who are Conservatives in Scotland are very conservative. Yeah. These are people who have not been pushed around by the SNP and so on. They know what they believe in, and they want that. And I believe that I can give them that. There is something really exciting that we could do here. We don't need to be the party of the last 14 years. There's a lot that we did that I'm glad we did, but there's also a lot that we got wrong. Let's talk about the wins. Let's say sorry for where we did get things wrong, but let's move forward and take a whole bunch of people with us.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Kemi. Good luck in the next few days.
Thank you.
And it's been fantastic having you on the Blueprint podcast.
Thank you, Ben.
And you as well, Lee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Blueprint podcast, brought to you by Conservative Home with me, Ben Houchin. Remember, you can like and subscribe on all of our social media channels, and you can catch a new episode every single Wednesday wherever you get your usual podcasts from.